Hi everyone, welcome. Welcome to this afternoon's panel discussion, Iso-Intimates. Nice to see some familiar faces and also some not so familiar faces, because I'm interested in having a dialogue with people who know things I don't know, which could be some of you guys this afternoon. So my name's Kate and I'm the creator of this afternoon's panel discussion. However, in the true spirit of creation, it is indeed relational. In a moment, I will get these three incredible women to introduce themselves, but just so that they're not nameless right now, I have Maya Ward beside me here, Vanessa Muradian. We're going to talk about the pronunciation of that name in one's mouth and language and intimacy there. And Lucien Dishanti Timpora. Wonderful to have you guys with us. Of course, an acknowledgement of country first. I like to do these, I guess, intimately. I like to do these with time. And to do this today, I'm going to read a section from Tyson Yunkaporta's Sand Talk. And if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. The passage that I'm going to read today, of course, has a little something to do, or may have a little something to do with what we're going to be talking about today. But also, I think, reveals again how much knowledge there is waiting for us if we were to listen to the oldest living culture in the world. So Tyson has just introduced a way of thinking that he calls kinship mind. And he says kinship mind is a way of improving and preserving memory in relationships with others. If you learn something with or from another person, this knowledge now sits in the relationship between you. You can access the memory of it best if you are together, but if you are separated, you can recall the knowledge by picturing the other person or calling out their name. This way of thinking and remembering is not limited to relationships with people. The kinship mind symbol, and I'm just going to hold this up for a second. So this is a symbol that he uses in the book for kinship mind. The symbol, the kinship mind symbol, shows the connectedness between two things, places or people, or knowledge, or any combination of these. Maybe even synapses. The two distinct entities form a pair connected by a relationship represented by the line at the center. Additionally, each entity is connected out to a multitude of other pairs, and that's something I want to talk about a bit today. And so the relationship is dynamic, responsive to shifting contexts. There is a tension and balance between, or maintained between, the individuality of each entity in each pair and their interdependence in a network of pairs. In Aboriginal worldviews, relationships are paramount in knowledge transmission. In our world, nothing can be known or even exist unless it is in relation to other things. Most importantly, those things that are connected are less important than the forces of connection between them. And so, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we meet on today, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and the Yalukit Willimbunwurrung people. Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Yalukit Willimbunwurrung are two of the 5 major language groups of the Greater Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to their land, their ancestors and their elders, past, present, and future emerging. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which anyone watching a recording of this event might be on today. Hopefully you've all put your asses into these wonderful chairs. Hopefully you've taken a moment to maybe even sense the temperature of that chair. Maybe taken a moment to look at people you know. I've just seen an old Year 12 student enter the building. Yay! Because we're in the business today of talking about intimacy in the age of isolation. This talk was born for me when there was a discord, essentially between law-making language and my experiences of intimacy in the age of isolation. At the time that I was gently massaging the tap on my bath, because I was having a midday bath, because I could, because I was working at home. At the time that I was talking more deeply with friends and family than I ever had before. At the time, I started to invest and investigate this field of spiritual ecology and was learning how to name the plants that I was walking past on my hour-long walk. A law was created that said that you could essentially ignore curfew, so you could leave after that 8 p.m. time slot, that you could leave your 5K zone if you had an intimate partner. Hang on a sec, what about my experiences with my bath tap? What about, and I'm a serial monogamist even in my relationship with lovers, what about those people who are polyamorous? What happens to that third person within the context of that law? Or even that glorious number one. You know, we were all rumbling with ourselves and getting to know ourselves better in isolation. Someone beautifully said to me, maybe in isolation, in that rumbling with ourselves, we might come to realize that we are all worthy of being wooed. We might come to like ourselves a little bit more. So today's panel discussion challenges, or perhaps maybe invites, a more full-bodied definition of the word intimacy. We might move away from the thinking mind to, and I'm going to quote you, Lucienne, already here, the felt sensations. We're going to consider the relational, including beyond the number two. Yeah, relationship with self, relationship beyond two, so three or more people, and of course, beyond the human, beyond the human. So welcome. Welcome to you all, and welcome to my three magnificent panelists. I don't like to put words into all of y'all mouths, so I was wondering if we could just go down the line. And I'd love you guys to introduce yourselves in relation to this word intimacy. Now, it could be in relationship to your work, or if your work is a little bit like play, then it can also be in relationship to your play. But a little of something that you do that might relate to this topic of intimacy. Does anyone want to start? Or Maya, maybe we'll start with you if that's okay.
Thank you. Is this working? And I'm loud enough? Great. Well, thank you so much to Kate for inviting me with, I think, 3 days' notice to come on board. Very pleased to be here. And very passionate about this topic. Before lockdown, I was very obsessively involved in an art form called contact improvisation, which is a dance form, a very, very intimate dance form. It's physical contact. I can't demonstrate it. Normally, I talk about contact improvisation quite often, and I normally would grab up a volunteer, but today I'm not sure that that sort of thing is allowed. It is dance. It's a fusion. Who here has never heard of contact improvisation? Most people, fantastic. It was developed in the 70s, a combination of modern dance and Aikido. Aikido is a martial art, a very physical, Asian-derived martial art where there's a lot of contact, sparring, engagement, and deep listening to the person you're sparring with. And the founders of this art form turned that around. Instead of combating, what if we're meeting each other in completely new ways? So it's full body physical. It's a lot about sharing weight. It's a lot about imagining. Go on.
Yes.
Go on.
Thank you, because I really want to.
It's making a system of two bodies, and the balance and the deep, deep listening that is required when two or more bodies come in contact. It is very intimate. It is extraordinarily sensual. It's not sexual, although the degree of sensuality can be extraordinarily confronting when you first meet it, because in a culture like ours, we don't have a lot of very deep contact except with lovers, children, and occasionally close friends. In this form, you're rolling around on the ground with someone. You may not know their name or have even seen their face, but your body is doing things with their body that you would probably have only even touched on perhaps with a lover. And it's safe, and it's respectful, and it's profoundly beautiful. It is transgressive, however, because it is saying this is okay, this is respectful, and this is a form of learning and a form of growth. So passionately interested in this art form. And then isolation, COVID comes along, what do we do? Very poignant to do a contact improvisation class on Zoom. The only form of contact you have with your former dance mates is through your eyes. And it's interesting because when you do contact improvisation, there's very little eye contact, probably because it is so physical and so intimate that you avoid that as a way of sort of keeping some sort of boundary. And here we are, we're dancing alone in our spaces and connecting only through the eyes. But aside from from that way of meeting, there is well, where are you? So we would, in our classes that we sort of co-led and co-created, was where are you? What are you intimate with right now? What are the surfaces underneath you? How are you feeling them? I feel like that's probably enough for now.
No, I was just going to say, like the little introduction when I may have used the word arse at the very beginning of the panel discussion. 100%. Thank you, Maya. Thank you. Vanessa, I might, while we're really enjoying the chair.
I can work.
Yes, I know you can.
I can be affected by your body without touching it.
Vanessa.
I'm into it. Hi, I'm Vanessa.
Thank you, Maya. Yes.
Thanks, Maya. I'll go from there. I work as a sexologist and a yoga teacher. At the moment, I have a little workplace called Mia Muse, which is kind of a femme-centric sexuality and wellness space. That has evolved a lot over the 11 years that I've had it. And in that, so is the conversation about sexuality and it being okay and social media being all over it / banning it. So my experience with intimacy and it not being, or that question about what an intimate partner is, I'm sure we're going to get into it, but for me, sexuality has always been stigmatised and the reason I started Mia Muse was because I felt like we didn't have a place to celebrate our sexuality. And I wanted to create a space to do that, to just make it normal and okay to talk about. So kind of these systematic or government decisions around what intimacy is, isn't at all surprising. And when Kate was like asking me what to do, I was like, just get out there and do whatever and then see what happens when the fine comes and what conversation we get to have around that, because I'm up for that. So I work with humans and their bodies and ultimately intimacy and connection all day. And it's also my favourite exploration with myself, what the hell that means through isolation, through burnout, through 10 years of talking to everyone about their sex lives while having a sex life of your own and not trying to write the paper also while you're breaking terrain in your own personal space. So it's an interesting place to be. Yoga, embodiment, and intimacy and connection are probably the reasons that I talk sex. So I'm totally into this conversation. I also have done many, many hours of rolling my body on other people's in yoga trainings, and I was talking to Kate about that too recently. I come from this lineage called embodied flow, which is just about inhabiting our bodies. And when people rock up and say, I'm having trouble with orgasm or connection or sound or movement, when was the last time you thought about your genitals, your big toe? And when we do think about it, that's like a gateway in to inhabiting it. And I love teaching people that foreplay, eroticism, intimacy is just right now, enlivening and available to us all the time. So that's a little bit of me.
Thank you, Vanessa. And you've sort of like done a little foreplay there already, because some of the things that you said, I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk about that later.
Great.
Lucy-Anne. Yes, Lucy-Anne, we would love to hear from you.
Hi. Wow. It's lovely to be here. So I have an experience of contact dance because I went to drama school for 3 years. I was teaching yoga for 10 years. I've been really focused on meditation, though, for the last couple of years. So I think I've always chosen these really intimate outlets in my life. And I'm really good at teaching it, but I'm not sure I'm very good at being in it myself. And it wasn't until lockdown and isolation that I was really faced with the work that I was doing and the work that I was teaching, and really required to kind of integrate it myself.
Lucy-Anne, could I possibly interrupt you just for a second, because you're kind of leaning into my first question already.
Okay.
So do you want to just start? Is there anything else you'd like to say about your work, or you want to just like flesh this one out?
I can bring them in together.
Okay, great.
So I just want to say that with the work of meditation, it's about becoming familiar and about awareness and connectedness and sensitivity and felt sensation, and a deep sense of understanding as well. And to allow the unexpected to kind of take over and allow yourself to go with that as well, and collaborate with the world, working with situations and working with things and working with yourself and others as well. And I think that is so intimate. And meditation and Dharma and mindfulness, you know, the qualities that it requires are such intimate ones. And I found myself starting a relationship just before isolation, and might I add, my first relationship ever at 31. And I had to put all of that into practice. And it was so scary and so awkward and so vulnerable. But I think in order to allow the intimacy to flourish, I had to do exactly what I had been teaching my students. I had to allow things to be as they were. I had to see clearly, become familiar, understand, get really, really like sensitive and into the felt sensation of what was going on, and let it kind of flourish itself without me projecting my conceived ideas of what intimacy was onto it, or, you know, the conventional ideas of it, or the constructed, you know, mind and ideas, and let all of that go. And it's so scary, but I think intimacy is scary. And I think that the felt sensation that comes from it is an awkward one and an uncomfortable one, but what a beautiful place to be in when you can let yourself be in an awkward and uncomfortable place, and what beautiful things can arise from that. And I think that it goes beyond relationships and to all, you know, relations in life, be it the world around you, the people around you, the things, the situations, if we can get, really familiar with what it is and try to understand and see clearly, we've created intimacy straight away with that thing or that person or that experience, and broken down all those filters in between. And that's going to be awkward. It's going to be, a little bit. I'm nervous right now, and I think it's because I feel quite intimate with you all, and I'm having a really deep felt sensation in my body right now, and that's telling me that this is an intimate moment, and not to be scared of that, but rather embrace it.
It's very much, and I'm just going to skip over my first question because you've gone there already in terms of, what do we do when a word like intimacy is, I suppose, framed within a particular context? And, you've illuminated, meditation teacher. When I actually asked Lucienne to join our panel discussion, she was like, I don't really have anything to offer intimacy in the realm. But I was like, hang on, I meditated with you through most of isolation. And it was probably some of the more intimate moments of my isolation experience. But then we got into this conversation, as Lucienne has just illuminated, when we recontextualize, when we can say, yes, I practice this over here, but I don't know what that looks like here. And essentially that's what the government ended up having to do, because we all went, hang on, intimacy is not necessarily or just sex. It's a multitude of things, and they had to create a little bubble network for those of us like me who are living on their own. So I'm going to move into, Vanessa, I'm going to ask you a question next, but I'm going to read you a little provocation. Can I read you something? Okay, so this article, this opinion piece was sent to me by about 20 friends, like, oh my God, people are talking about what you talk about. They've put it in an article. It was an opinion piece on ABC called Sex Under Lockdown, but Not Friendship, ? The Discriminations of Intimacy. And it was by Stephanie Collins, and here's a name to put into your mouth, Luara Ferraccioli. Vanessa Muradian. I feel like we could have a whole discussion about the intimacy of language in one's mouth. Like, let's just have an hour chat about that. Are you ready? Drum roll, Vanessa.
Yes.
So, thank you. Thank you for your acceptance. A final question they raise in this opinion piece. Why are the Victorian regulations as they are? The answer probably lies in what philosopher Elizabeth Brake calls amatonormativity. This is the assumptions that a central, exclusive, amorous relationship is normal for humans, in that it is a universally shared goal, and that such a relationship is normative in that it should be aimed at in preference to other relationship types. As Brake puts it, amatonormativity describes assumptions embedded in statements like, she hasn't found the one yet. Aren't you lonely, immature, irresponsible because you're not married or partnered? Vanessa, as a woman who's not married, I turned 41 this year, I'm not married and haven't been. As a woman who's had many ones, and I would have to say, including more recently myself, could you please bring us up to 2021, please, when it comes to something that we do have to ask. If one of our first thoughts when we say the word intimacy is sex, if it is, we need to talk about it. We need to unpack that. But I would love you to, I guess, talk to or bring us up to 2021 with this idea of intimacy when it comes to or when it pertains to sex and pleasure.
Sure.
Thanks.
Firstly, when you ask me that, I want to say, what is sex? Are we talking heteronormative penis in the vagina sex? Because if we're not, ideally we're not, because that is really limiting. Number one, no one learns how to do that properly, and it's kind of trial and error until you think you've got it perfectly pleasurable, and then the next day it might change on you and shift and whatever. So that's really important to kind of land in your own experience. What is erotic energy? What is sensuality? What makes you feel desire? And for me, I talk to desire and libido, like arousal and vitality for life. So the feelings of nervousness that Lucien was like, I won't name them as nervousness, but aliveness or adrenaline that is right here in the intimacy of this space, that's foreplay. I can choose to direct it however I like, but essentially the feeling of what I'm feeling here is similar to like if I see someone who I find hot and they smile at me and then I'm like, okay, turn it on, direct it, keep it contained, and work it, let's say. So the sex can start there if you want it to. It can also start here. And I definitely teach that your life is foreplay. And those teachings have developed over, the decades. So for me, it's not at all surprising that Dan was fumbling all over, like, what does intimacy mean? I remember. I was like, of course he is. And it was pretty great that then within, I think it was 2-3 weeks that the bubble came about. It felt that way. It could have been 6 months, who knows?
Along with some great videos, Lucien sent me one of like, how many times how many times can I see someone before it becomes intimate? Like, can I go and visit that person after 10 dates or 15 dates?
100%. So they're all things that we really kind of, from the lawmaking standpoint, I guess what's the beautiful thing is that once it hits discussion in the press conference that's happening every day, and that he is like, oh, I don't know what intimacy is, or intimacy is sex, kind of. Like, that to me is exciting, the fact that he has to stand there and have a laugh, which means we can intersect that with all of these conversations, which are really relevant. So for your own sex life, knowing that it is interchangeable with how you feel around your passions, around connections with all humans. Often when we're wanting to have sex, baby, let's have some sex. What am I asking for? I'm asking for connection. And, I definitely pull that out in one-on-one therapy all the time when we kind of get right down to it. What is it that you're after? And I guess we're all here to answer the beautiful kind of perspectives on what connection actually is. So it's with my body, it's with you when we're sexually relating. If that means you're sucking my toe or touching my toe, which, it could also happen while I'm getting a foot massage. And it's about the intention and how we look at it, and also by these quite esoteric concepts around eroticism. Like if we're asking about the erotic, Esther Perel says it's risk and mystery, like that being at an edge. But when we get to talk about that in flow state, say when you're like in your authentic place, like you play the piano, just say, I don't, even though it felt like I did. Like this might be a flow state for me, often like being in front of people with a mic where I'm like, yes, I love it, but I fucking hate it at the same time. I don't hate it at all. I love it.
You can hate it a little bit. I had a mo this morning. I was like,
yeah, there's all that, but that risky edge, that brings us into this flow state. And flow state, I think, also beautifully talks to Dharma. And Dharma, like almost handballing to Lucien, but is this divine us as a unique being in the world. What are we offering? And when the egoic mind, the cognition slows down, the judge, the critic, right? We get into this space where we are amazingly us, whether that is alone at your piano, or that is in front of a crowd, or that is tending to the garden or your child, where it all goes and you flow. And often in sex, right? Sex, when we're having it in a beautiful way, that's what that is, this present moment-to-moment exchange. So whether that involves penetration, full-bodied naked massage, half nude or not, a person casually with respect or 10 years deep. It's all around how we look at it, but the feelings in the body and the chemicals, the hormones that make up the experience for it then to be this glorious, illuminating exchange and way is, kind of regardless of the environment, if that makes sense. So the intimacy can occur, and if we know what we're about, if we know what we want here, and the mind can, you can be intentional about it, that's everywhere. What was the question initially?
Oh no, that was an answer. Let's just say that was an answer. And I suddenly had these images of Dan Andrews answering after listening to you, what does intimacy mean? And he's like, it's like when you're on your piano or when you're getting to know your toe. Or he could have even borrowed from the education system and gone, when Sir Ken Robinson talks about that elemental state, that's intimacy. Can you imagine? Oh, yum, 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 yum.
And it's so philosophical, and they are there to give us rules, to give us guidelines. So when it drops into this beautiful felt sense discussion or about relating or about love or about intimacy, they're not equipped. So that's where you bring in the sexological expert to define that or to not, and then you throw up your hands and say bubble. Okay, do whatever you want.
And as you say, there was actually, there was something really exciting, or there is potential for something really exciting when a government leader does fumble in that vulnerability and go, we actually need to talk about what intimacy is. Hi, Maya. Can I ask you a question now? Yay. Okay, so I read an essay and listened to one actually on the Emergence magazine podcast with Michael McCarthy about how nature is became visible again during isolation. Literally, so we had this fall in emissions during now I'm going to say this right, the anthropause. We have a name for this now. When the world all stopped at the same time for isolation, the great anthropause. That there was, for instance, you could suddenly see Mount Everest from Punjab for the first time in 30 years. He also says in this essay, though, he says, people turned to the natural world for solace at a time of great stress. Now, there's a whole bunch of research, Ulrich, the study about, if you're in a hospital and you have a tree outside your window, you're more likely to heal quicker. We know that nature can be very healing, but after looking and delving and rolling around in your work a little bit, I wondered if there was maybe a little bit of a problem with this statement, because it sort of suggests that nature is over here and then we can kind of take from it as a resource when we need it. Highly problematic. Yeah. And I wanted to ask, when you use phrases or you ask questions of our human nature and intimacy and relationship, when you ask, who are those that become your body? When you talk about the fact that we, or those of us in this area, ingest the Yarra River, we put her in our mouth through our water systems and we ingest her. We are part the Yarra. I was wondering if you could talk to this about our intimate connection to nature in this way. Can you talk a bit to that?
Beautiful.
Oh, you said it, not me.
Well, Kate is alluding to the fact that many years ago I walked the length of the Yarra River from the sea to the source, following the ancient Wurundjeri songline, 40, 50, 60,000 years walked, only 100 years not walked in a sacred manner. So to set out as a pilgrim with the blessings of the Wurundjeri and to walk all day, every day beside the river, coming into a completely new intimacy, both with the river and my own body and the space between us. That space between us grew into something that completely turned me inside out. And I did come to really question the very foundations of my own identity. If 70% of my body is water, and all my life I've lived at the end of a Yarra River tap, and every time I turn on that tap, out flows Birrarung, and in she comes to my body. I am more river than anything else. So I'm a piece of river with the tongue and hands, the capacity to speak of my love of myself as river. That's just talking about the river. It's the food that we eat. It's the air that we breathe. Our air is at this very moment being created by these beautiful beings here, these Platanus orientalis trees growing up, 7 stories up, showing their little fingertips. As we breathe in, their body enters us. As we breathe out, our body enters theirs. We are a co-creation. There is no such thing as a human. Literally, it's an idea, it's a concept, it's not a truth. We are all one big relational system. So when I had to stop contact improvisation, I turned to my friends, the trees and the earth and the land. I've got this beautiful piece of land that I live on the banks of Birrarung up in Warburton, and there's this spot where there's this little hollow that really nicely fits my bottom. And so to lie on the earth there and feel my bum really deeply nestling in and just to relax into, to let myself melt into the earth there, profoundly intimate. But I have had practice at this. Walking the river was actually a practice of saying, dear river, could you be my teacher? What can I learn from you if I actually attend, if I deeply listen? And that was a significant experience for me because I did start feeling the communication come both ways and that sort of intimacy. You asked somewhere in there, are we just taking from? No, we're in a relationship. What does it mean? What would it mean if we thought we mattered to the rest of nature? And this is a really, really crucial question for this time. If we're to grow as a culture, we have to think of ourselves as mattering, as part of the system. And so there was, in this exploration I've been doing, of really attending to other beings and doing this through really attending to my own body, like really getting in touch with this is the starting point for getting in touch with other bodies. Like as Indigenous people teach through their dances, if you want to learn about kangaroo, you've got to start moving like a kangaroo. You've got to start getting in there. If you want to successfully have a relationship with that other being, your body and their body have to come into relationship. And so to work with trees, for instance, in this way, that time when I was walking past trees, the day when I realised the trees were looking back at me, everything changed. Because that's when I went, oh, risk. What does it mean if they're to see me? Who am I? Who must I be to be worthy of the gaze of the tree? How do I have to constitute myself to be someone who can stand there in the face of a tree that is looking at me and to drop into a co-learning space and then to ask permission. Tree, may I dance with you? May I lean on you? May I lean in to you? And then to see where that goes. There's a lot of risk in that. Because what if the tree says no? Do I know what that looks like, feels like, sounds like? That is back to the Dharma, really, for me.
I'm thinking the entire time, this is so dharmic. Like Vanessa's saying, with that energy to work it. And, in the Dharma tradition, you're encouraged to collaborate with the world, to work with the world, to work it. And then Maya's saying, to work with the kangaroos, you've got to be the kangaroo. And And again, becoming familiar, understanding something in order to work with it, there has to be this familiarity, this understanding, this deep sense of listening and looking and watching and observing and being a part of in order to then collaborate and work with. So these qualities of mindfulness, connectedness, awareness, empathy even, they are the embodiment of intimacy. The two are one.
Yes.
I'm thinking, it should be called intimacy meditation, not mindfulness meditation. Like, you meet a partner and you say, you know what, I really want to get mindful with you. Like, hey, let's get mindful together. Like, it's the same, no?
Let's go out and look at a tree for a bit. I'm going to do a little segue in a minute too here. I've just realised that that's a great segue, Kate. Let's go out and look at a tree and learn about reciprocity, because a healthy relationship involves healthy reciprocity. So let's see how we relate to the tree and learn from it about reciprocity. Yeah.
And all
Go,
of that
Vanessa.
can sound so random and esoteric. When I was a kid and not my parents, but the tree hugger kind of vibe, like what's that about? But I'm definitely hugging trees more and more. And what the issues, like from my perspective around sexuality and connection, what stops that is disembodiment, stress, contraction. So anything that can kind of cause this. And, tying in the awkwardness of like being seen by a tree, right? But like even naming that, some of us might be like, oh, maybe not here in the north.
Seen by a person, a partner as
well.
well.
Yeah. So, from my perspective, these things are actually quite awesome and beautiful and wonderful kind of starting points, even though for me, when I was like, have I been seen by a tree? I'm not yet sure. I'm going to go home and they probably saw. I've got this new house in North Warrandyte. I've been nude all over the land. They have definitely seen me.
It
but
was
I don't
a big
know.
shock.
Yeah,
It was a real thing. It was a sense of their agency. So, and there was a before and there was an after. I have never experienced this, and now I've experienced it. What do I do with this?
Yeah.
And you're exactly right that this can just seem like weird tree hugger stuff. But this is where we do, as a culture, I think, need to get more aware of what a flow state does to the brain, what we are as an ecological system. We literally are co-constituted, symbiotic, relational, interpenetrative beings at all times in every single moment. If we have a cultural context for that things like Buddhism or the Dharma does give us, and the sort of sex positive vision does give to us, it really is a useful way in for changing these conversations.
Yeah, and it's all about being in, like, with humans and sex, it's like all about being in relationship, and that's the most, for a lot of people, it's like terrifying to like be able to fully let go in the bedroom. But to understand what it is to feel the river in your body as you're walking by it, and that you're moved by the river, or that you are in constant conversation with the natural world and the world around you and even this world. To get that in your body, to have a breath and be like, okay, cool, I'm actually just going to check in with my posture, and if I can have a deep breath into the bottom ends of my lungs, or maybe my back body. And doing that down regulates us. It brings us into parasympathetic, which allows arousal. So the point is that we're not taught, we're not having these conversations about how to be fully present, whatever that actually means. And we've got this body, so that means it's in the body, and sex and pleasure, it's about your pleasure in your body. So what are the starting points for that to arouse, to feel good? It definitely starts, like if you've got a tree, it starts with, a full breath in front of the tree and being curious about talking to it.
Can I pick up on this? So essentially there's been words like presentness and flow, reciprocity, one of my favourite new words, and talk about, I suppose, something that came up listening to other people in the age of isolation was dating dating in the age of isolation, I heard a lot of stories that essentially moved from the conversations that I was used to having with friends who were dating on apps, who, you know, kind of went with that unspoken rule of like, first date you go out, second date you have a kiss, third date you have sex. When you were talking about cortisol and you're talking about, you know, adrenaline, and we could even talk about consumerism and just like boom, 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 let's keep moving, let's go, you know. And suddenly what I was hearing from my friends was essentially, it was like, oh, well, because we couldn't go to a bar, we went for this really nice long walk. Or they would say things like, you know, it was really funny, like I hadn't really seen what they looked like because I had a mask on. And I couldn't help but think about ye olden days when us women particularly were covered, even gloves, you know, and you might see a little wrist pop out of the, you know, the glove, and suddenly it was all very titillating. Oh my God, what do they look like under the mask, you know? And that these deep conversations were happening, even on apps, you know, for a lot longer perhaps than what my friends had said had happened before isolation. And I wondered if, and this is open to all of you, as all the other questions were in some way, but I was wondering if you could talk about essentially the rhythms of intimacy. I mean, does it dictate something slower? Does intimacy dictate something slower? And I can already feel one answer a little bit further down the aisle here. Does it require a different relationship to space and time, listening? And I'm going to get a little punny here. Do we literally have to slow the fuck down to understand what intimacy is?
Yes.
Off you go. Enjoy that one.
All right, I'll share. My partner and I, we knew each other. We didn't meet during isolation. We started dating before, and we were both very much open to just going with the flow and not really labeling anything, until Dan Andrews kind of said, you can only see your partners. So we sort of looked at each other and were like, oh, are we partners? Like, and I guess because of the outside world, we were pressed to define our relationship. And so we had to tell people, this is my boyfriend, this is my girlfriend, when we were out in public, because you could only be with your boyfriend and your girlfriend. So it definitely forced us to kind of define ourselves. But I think we both needed that push. And it was extremely intimate time because, you know, our time together was spent cooking, walking, talking, very, very much being totally present and authentic with the other. And I think that is such fertile ground for intimacy, whether you like it or not. The more time you spend with someone, especially in a really connected and present, you know, way, inevitably intimacy is going to bloom and blossom. I just don't think it cannot if you're spending that much time with someone by choice. So I'm really grateful, personally speaking, for this lockdown experience, because I think it was the push that I needed to allow myself to be seen in a relationship. My previous relationships, I always had a way to run away, you know, and out, and lockdown didn't give me that. It only gave me an in, and it's definitely what I needed. And we're still in a relationship today, although he lives 17,000 kilometres away. That's another story and another way of exploring intimacy as well, now that we're in a long-distance relationship. So if anyone has any tips, please let me know, because I'm in my first relationship, my first long-distance relationship, the first time I've ever said I love you to someone, and now, you know, he lives on the other side of the world, so I don't know what to do, which I also think is a great place to be in, because you have to let the unexpected take you along on its journey if you're going to really experience anything worth experiencing.
Good. Yeah.
Could I continue on from there?
Go.
Well, my human relationship, my primary human relationship is with a person, yes. My partner of 7 years. Lockdown was quite difficult for him challenging. For me, life barely changed. I'm a writer who lives in the country, who's an introvert. Like, what lockdown?
I
really
know,
didn't notice
I
it.
understand that very much.
But for him, it was a challenge. And I don't think he would mind. He's not here, but I'm pretty sure he'd be fine me talking about this. He's suffered from chronic and severe PTSD all his life from some childhood experience. And intimacy has been a very, very slow journey with him. Lockdown was the catalyst. There was no running away. There were the less distractions. The challenge was the gateway into the breakthrough, the breakdown to the breakthrough to a completely different level of intimacy. I was hanging in there because he was a very beautiful person. I thought, I hope this can happen. I hope this can happen. Got to around September, went, it's not happening. I can't do this anymore. But he said, just a little bit longer. And he started doing the online therapy. What's that? EMDR? That really good for PTSD. And the breakthrough, the epiphany, and then the intimacy. So I know that for many relationships, it's been either not at all or a completely different level of connection. And I think I think this time has been, a return to the local, a return to connection with place, a return to children and family and close connection and simplicity, and that breakthrough. And not for everyone, but for a significant amount of people, it's been one of the best things that's ever happened in their lives.
I'm
A
going to
return
take
to simplicity.
Yeah,
I love that, yeah. That's how our relationship felt during, it was just very simple and it was enough and it was perfect.
Ours did not feel simple.
Thank God. I was like, please, because it would also,
No,
and
but
this
it's
will
never
come
been
into my
simple.
last question, but go there, Vanessa, if you feel like it.
I think that just what I see, particularly in long-term relating, and also we're in the long-term relating zone. But yeah, the lockdown was a lock-in. So yes, you're attuned to the other because they're around you if that's happening. But yeah, I see it a lot with clients and I see it a lot with myself that, it will come up in your most intimate relationships, all your shit. And if that is because you're forced to be in a room or a house on your own, and you're fortunate enough that then your survival is about what's coming up in your emotional, mental health, that you can go there, that's awesome. And yeah, it's a privilege, but it's also really hard work, which I love to acknowledge as well, that we have the privilege to access our well-being if we do, and that is honourable, and if you can, go there. But so when it's there, when we're forced, and I think Kate was mentioning that it was like maybe a choice to kind of go there, but I didn't necessarily feel like it was a choice. I'm always ready to strap in and go deep, but for me it was kind of screaming at me what was coming up in lockdown. And it all affects our relationship. What my experience of myself, my trauma, my healing, my connections, my wants and desires, all of that will affect my intimate partner. And it is, if we can allow space for that, and particularly those who identify as men, that is really go there. Go into yourself, get the support, get the help. I know it was kind of squashed out of us. Well, it was in my generation. I didn't. Cis men, particularly, feelings, and anyone kind of oppressed. We've all been oppressed by this, to-do list of success. And in that, we lost the emotional connection. But that's what being in relationship is. And it has to be met. And if it doesn't get met, it's going to scream you down, right? It's like that anxiety of da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Sometimes I think those two are a clash of the head and the heart. So when I hear your beautiful story of him even saying just like, just a little longer. That kind of self-responsibility that knows they need more space. That is what a long-term relationship allows. It allows spaciousness, growth. There's connection in that allowing, in that permission, right? That's fucking intimate.
It was John O'Donoghue, I think, who said in an On Being podcast, he actually said, so Krista Tippett said, oh, you know, are we less capable of love and commitment these days? And he takes it further to talk about intimacy, and he says, no, I just think we're less practiced at it. And that thing that you sort of mentioned, Vanessa, before, or all of us at some point, about the kind of go, go, go. It's like we've got to keep moving, you know, but maybe just a little bit more time, just a little bit more time.
Can I just add something with the word practice? And I think relationships take practice. I think everything takes practice, and meditation is a practice. And I want to stress that it doesn't make perfect. It makes you prepared, you know, for what's going to come up or what could come up, and you're just so much more skillfully able to respond to whatever comes up if you are doing the work and the practice with, you know, whatever comes up in front of you in whatever situation, to just be prepared from, you know, your practice and the work that you're doing, and go, okay, this is the way things are, I'm going to accept that first of all, and then what am I going to do next? What action am I going to take? You know, in a really skillful way, with intelligence and with collaboration and sensitivity and empathy and all those things that, you know, I can't stress enough that mindfulness and meditation practice can give you.
And can I invite just again, everybody, that when Lucienne uses the word relationship, that we do think about it in terms of ourselves, in terms of our relationship to nature, our partners, our families. And I guess this is an Achilles heel of time, and I apologise, but it might be the case where we do a bit of distanced milling to ask questions at the end of this. I don't think we can actually pass around a microphone anyway, which is a bit sad. But I wanted to ask you guys finally, I'm going to read out some quotes, again, some provocations. And I'd love you to hold in your mind this question of a sort of a survival kit, whether it's for periods of COVID-related isolation, again, or just periods of isolation that we can all have when we feel a little alone. I'm just going to read these out to you. And actually, it came a little bit off the back of the podcast 99% Invisible with Roman Mars. He had this great episode where he walked around his house and he was like, hi, everyone, I'm in isolation. This is my record. And then he started talking about his relationship to the record, or, you know, the fork in his kitchen, you know, objects. We could also talk as well about mycelium and mushrooms, but that is like a whole nother bloody conversation about the relational. David White said, to feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your own surroundings. Björk, she has to come into every bloody thing I do. Love her so much. I never really understood the word loneliness. As far as I was concerned, I was in an orgy with the sky and the stream, all of nature. And so in the age of isolation, acute loneliness was felt. I mean, I was fucking lonely for sure. And I say that from a privileged position. I'm not homeless. I'm not one of my beautiful, highly hormonal teenagers who never had a friend before isolation, and then went into isolation with all those hormones, was locked up with their family at the time that you're supposed to reject them. Physiologically, you're supposed to be rejecting your family, and isolation goes, boom, rumble with that shit. Yes? Can you, and I'm going to have to sadly ask you to be just a little briefer, a little more intimate, yes, with your response. A little survival kit alongside this idea of aloneness and this ever constant relational. I'm going to put my microphone down.
I'll go. I think everything we've been talking about, sensuality is a beautiful gateway in. I also wanted to, that's why I went first, because my comment about humans and cis men getting support, I just see it a lot, and we didn't have permission to kind of talk. They didn't have, like, women, we can talk a bit more, and it's a beautiful gateway into the emotive, but that space is missing, and I think it's just so needed for men, cis men, to get out there and to be heard, whatever that is, and then move the body. But really take the risks to get the help and support to learn how to be intimate with yourself, with your community, brothers, sisters, humans. That's what I meant. And yeah, my huge story is abandonment and aloneness. And that's why I started all this work years ago, is because I had to learn how to be intimate with the space around me, how to be intimate with consciousness. If when I learn that what makes me kind of good at everything else, or a good lover or a good friend or whatever, but really it was this quest to kind of not feel alone. And all of these things are definitely beautiful ways to not feel alone.
Absence of speed. Whether it's with yourself, taking a moment to sit and be with yourself, to stop and look at what's around you and see, and have sensitivity to see and let it be, and let yourself be seen, and listening as well with somebody, really listening to them, not to speak but to listen. So absence of speed, slowing down where you can with yourself, with the world around you, and in your partnerships and relationships as well.
Practices, as you said, practicing the good things. So practicing breathing, practicing awareness of skin in air, practices of listening to trees, other beings, attention, trying not to be distracted in the most distractible age ever, to confront humans, to try and put down screens. I mean, I'm saying all this because I find it so hard. But to every moment, to breathe, to remember my skin, to remember the breath, and to remember gratitude that I am a constituted being who can't possibly be alone except in one very small corner of my neocortex. In every other way, I'm with and all of it. And just to try and remember that. Remembering.
I want so much more time with you all, and you're all becoming my besties so that we can have more time. Did you? I can.
Also, just find your body right now. Your posture, your spine is a good one.
Yes.
I like.
Where are you right now?
Yeah, I was just going to offer a minute of meditation, which is kind of, I feel like, where you were going.
I was just going to, I'll do this one and then you can do your one.
It's so funny.
Mine's not even a minute. Mine's like 3 seconds.
We all had the same thought.
If you close your eyes, we can have a big breath in and out. And then I like to get my yoga students to imagine that they had eyes between their shoulder blades. And then maybe you want to imagine eyes around the rest of your body too. How do you inhabit the space around you with this in the body mind? That was my little cue. And you can do that all day long, right? Over to you, Lucian.
Oh, okay, I'll follow on from that. So have your feet planted and just place your hands on your thighs, and now allow your eyes to actually open and take in the world around you. So without looking around you, your eyes are open, you're seeing without looking. You have a deep sense of the reality that's around you. You can hear, you can smell, you can feel, and none of that is rejected. All of that that's around you in your immediate environment and beyond is welcomed into this moment. And all the while, although your awareness is aware of all of that, all the while you have this really gentle attention on the felt sensation of your breath, where you feel your breath, where your breath is affecting your body, and see how intimate that feels when you go from watching and witnessing and observing to actually feeling and sensing something. There's a switch from distance to intimacy. So just this moment of everything's here, it's all there, it's all part of my experience, nothing's rejected. But I'm anchored by the breath and the felt sensation of the breath. And like Vanessa said, that's always there for you. It's always available to you. Just feel that breeze.
And I hope as you exit today that you even take a moment, we've talked about nature, and I know Vanessa, at one point you said even this ground underneath us. Maybe your eyes are drawn to something as you leave this space. Maybe you want to put your hand on something as you walk out of this space. Feel the texture of it. I've wanted to touch your dress, actually, for most of it. I don't know what it is, the linen, something. And that again, that you can take that with you wherever you go. You can take that moment, that felt sensation. Women, thank you very, very, very much. And if these beautiful, amazing, intelligent women choose to stick around, feel free, I'm sure, to ask your questions there. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Wonderful.